Hey, it's MJ from the Coaches Panel. I hope you are. Welcome back to another of our player reviews where we take a look at every single person that's moved clubs during the 2023 off-season via free agency or through the trade mechanism. Tell you what it means for the club they've left, the club they've arrived at, and for us that play SuperCoach Dream Team and AFL Fantasy, what it means for us for the season of 2024 and beyond. Every single trade and free agency period throws up a little bit of a surprise. Previous years, it's been Jason Horne-Francis. This year, you could argue that it's Taylor Adams. Not too many thought that the vice captain of the Pies would change clubs this off-season, but that is exactly what he has done. He no longer is a Magpie. He is now part of his third AFL club. He's back in Sydney, but this time it's at the Sydney Swans. Let's look at what it means for the Magpies before we move on to the Swans and then take a look at the fantasy potential output here. From a Collingwood perspective, he played 22 games this year. Keep that in mind, given the fact that so often he's been talked about this injury-prone player. But 22 this year, only missed one in the home and away season. I think it was 17 games in 2022. So he's building a change in narrative that maybe, injuries are there, and that's what cost him a grand final and an ultimate premiership at the club. But he's moving out of Collingwood for one primary reason. Okay, it's two. One, to elongate his AFL career and get a longer contract, but two, he's no longer part of that midfield mix as a primary emphasis. Rather, he's a forward that's pushing up in and around the ground. So I think from a Collingwood perspective, they've clearly moved past him in the midfield, and they have to now. But where he was there in the forward line, I think this is a good news for Collingwood, is Taylor's actually a pure in and out midfielder. I know he's been trialled at various times through his career as a half forward. There was even one time under Nathan Buckley, he was used across half back and picked up defensive status 1 year for us in SuperCoach and AFL Fantasy. But the reality is about Taylor Adams, at his best, he's an in and under contested beast, loves winning the hard contested footy and does it really, really well. And he does apply some decent amount of defensive mindset pressure. So for Collingwood, with him spending so much time forward of the ball and him departing out, it means there is an opportunity in that forward line. I think there's two really obvious candidates. One is a Jack Ginnivan. I know at times he's been in and out of the side and played in that grand final winning team, but he didn't solidify himself as a best 22 player this year. So I think that's an opportunity, but really the most obvious new inclusion coming in, and it's a likely one at time of recording, but I think it's going to land. Lachie Schultz, the Fremantle Docker. I think the out of Adams and the in of Schultz is an incredibly great move for the Magpies. They've got this really mix and match forward line where they've got some really dangerous smalls, McCreery, Ginnivan, that add a lot of pressure. Elliott is really the ace in the hole for them. And then you've got guys like a Mason Cox, Myercheck, McStay, filling a variety of tall forward roles. So Schultz will offer this beautiful X-Factor craft. He's a really nice mark overhead, good on the lead. So I think the out of Adams and the inclusion of Schultz actually just makes their forward line so much more potent. I know a lot of people think this is good news for Finn Macrae, and look, maybe there's an element where there's some upside here for Finn Macrae, but for me, I don't think Adams out, Macrae in is an immediate move. I think if Macrae is going to force his way into the side, it's going to be as a pure midfielder, and from a fantasy perspective and a Magpies perspective, that's where we want him, and that's actually where he's been at his best for the Collingwood Football Club in the VFL. From a Sydney perspective, it did feel like they were short in two, probably three significant areas this year. One, in the ruck, two, key position stocks, and three, just with some additional depth through the forward line. And I feel like through Hamling, through Grundy, and now with Adams, these three big additions to the side, they've made sure they've dealt with every single gap they had in their team. So I love this move because Adams is going straight into the midfield. The mix now gets interesting for me. I can't see a world where Warner's not a centre bounce midfielder. I think Rowbottom, while similarities are there to Taylor Adams, he's a little bit more defensive minded. I think this opens up an opportunity for Sydney to lengthen the AFL career of a Luke Parker and use him more forward with the departure of Buddy Franklin. That need to get some more dynamic forward options into that forward line so it's not just a Papley and Logan McDonald show, I think is really important for them. So I like this move for Sydney because Taylor Adams coming into the mids adds some depth, adds some grunt, adds another really contested ball winner. And it wouldn't actually surprise me if, as Callum Mills returns back to playing AFL from this shoulder injury, that we see Callum Mills spend a little bit more time back in the halfback line where he broke out for us as a fantasy footballer and from a Sydney perspective. So it wouldn't surprise me if Adams moves a couple of these older players in Parker to be less predominant through the mids, and a really versatile player in Mills in there as well, because Warner and Goulden are the future of this football club. I think Adams just adds on top of that. So to me, I think Taylor Adams is a nice addition for the Swans. What moves come as a cascade off the back of that is really not just the interesting one for Sydney, but also for us from an AFL Fantasy, SuperCoach and Dream Team perspective. With him spending so much time this year in 2023 inside the forward 50 for the Magpies, he picked up forward status, and I fully expect him to hold that heading into 2024. And this is good news for us because he's priced in and around the 70s across the formats. But just 2 years ago, he was averaging in the high 90s in SuperCoach. I even think in 2021, he averaged the ton in AFL Fantasy and Dream Team. I know that feels like 2 years ago, but he's shown just this year at Collingwood. He's still got the scoring with multiple tons, and he's still got the ceiling. I remember that game against Fremantle where he went, I think it was a 120 plus score in AFL Fantasy and Dream Team and a 140 plus in SuperCoach. Multiple 90s across the year, and definitely it did correlate when he spent that heavier midfield moments that he definitely saw the scoring. So the scoring capacity of Taylor Adams is there. I think he does hold forward status heading into a new season, and priced in that 70s. He's in that interesting point for us across the formats where he could present upwards of 20 to 30 points per game of value. Much has been made already of the departure of the big forwards from 2023 that we will not have heading into 2024. But Taylor has proven scoring pedigree, 110 plus ceilings in his history and multiple hundreds across his career. Yes, he's at the back end of it, but a guy that's at 70 that could go 100, that should get plenty of midfield minutes, have forward status, and be in a relatively fantasy-friendly system, which we know Sydney are. I'm really quite excited about this for Taylor Adams. He's absolutely someone you should be putting on your watch list. I'm interested to see what this does for an Errol Goulden and some cascading pain. Does this put Errol a little bit more on the outside? Or they're like, no, we found our key 4, key 5 now. It's Adams, it's Rowbottom, it's Warner, it's Goulden. And we just see, like I said, a Parker or a Mills, once he's back from injury, starting to just be kind of the gravy on this midfield rather than what they've been historically, which has been the big scoring and the heavy lifted players doing all the work. So for me, I love this move for Sydney. I love this move for us as fantasy. I think Taylor is absolutely a watch list. I am forecasting him to hold forward status in 2024, which means he'll be a popular consideration in the preseason. Is he going to score enough in this role? I think that's the conversation. The injury thing is absolutely real, but 22 games this year. Yes, he got injured and missed the grand final and the premiership from the Magpies because of it. So we know that risk is there. But as I always say in SuperCoach and AFL Fantasy in the preseason, it's this. Guys with an injury history that's concerning for you, you start them, you don't trade into them because you minimize the risk of trading into the injury when you start with such a player rather than you miss the good scores, trade into them, and then the injury risk. Actually, the variation only just grows. So to me, I think Taylor Adams is an absolute watch list for sure. That will go up even higher if, as I forecast, he gets forward status. If that happens, oh boy, there'll be a lot of love for Taylor Adams if he can get through the preseason. uninterrupted and uninjured. I think it's a good pick for Sydney. I think it's nice for the Magpies, especially with Lachie Schultz coming in and taking the Taylor Adams role. But do you agree or disagree about my take about Taylor Adams and what it means, not just for Sydney and for the Magpies, but what it means for us as AFL Fantasy and Dream Team coaches? You can have your say in the comments below. If you're enjoying these player reviews, make sure you follow us and turn on the subscription and notifications here on YouTube. We'll be back with another player review shortly. But if you want more exclusive content than just these videos and other things that will come during the pre-season proper of 2024, you can become a financial supporter of ours at our Patreon. All the details are in the description of this video. There's bonus content, there's hidden groups, and a bunch of other rewards just for joining. For as little as $2 a month, you can become a supporter of the Coaches Panel. All the Patreon link details are below. Thanks for watching, and I can't wait to chat with you about another player that's moved clubs this offseason.